You've just entered the law offices of Quibble, Squabble, and Bicker. If you've come for actual legal advice, you need to turn right around, honey. You need to get out of here, 'cause you ain't gonna get none of that. They quibble, and they squabble, and they bicker. But if you want to hear meaningless opinions, this is the right place. They got plenty of that. Stuff that makes no sense at all. They go off on tangents. It's crazy talk. If that's your thing, keep listening. They'll keep talking.
Oh no no, oh no no, it's another episode of the Law Offices of Quibble, Squabble, and Bicker. You've entered the Law Offices of Quibble, Squabble, and Bicker. Yay!
Welcome to another episode of the Law Offices of Quibble, Squabble, and Bicker on this May 29th, 2021. Still mid-pandemic, but though there is a light at the end of the tunnel, we have an extra special guest today. It's an actual lawyer, unlike us, who pretend to be lawyers and know nothing. But this is a gentleman who has been at the forefront of the digital age. He was once vice president for Prodigy Communications back in the 90s, back at the time when that was a big deal, along with America Online, CompuServe, Earthlink, a number of other well-known names in that field. He is currently a media and entertainment lawyer, as well as produces different movies, including two movies right now called The Virtuoso and Snowbabies. Virtuoso is with Anthony Hopkins. Snowbabies is with people that I have no idea who are in them. But he says they're good movies, so you should see them. Anyway, and he'll be helping us out later on with our client, Cancel Me, too. So we'll get into that much later. Anyway, Marc Jacobson, thank you so much for coming on. We were surprised to find out that an attorney was actually willing to come on our fake attorney show, and especially one with your qualifications. And
well, I can always hang up, so it's no problem.
True, and then it would be me and Greg talking to each other, and we've done that plenty. So we'd much rather have you here. So what is it about the current era of the digital age that, cause I would say you were kind of a visionary if you got involved with Prodigy back in the early 90s. You know, you would have to have some kind of a clue that there's something big happening here since you actually invested money into it. What is it now that you see as like the next big thing in terms of the information age?
I've never been asked that. I guess it's all about, people say content is king and content is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. What's really king is distribution. If you have the eyeballs, as it was even back in the mid 90s when I started, you have the ability to make money. The content will find you. So at Prodigy, we had like 1 million subscribers, and AOL had many millions, and CompuServe had hundreds of thousands. But now when you look at the numbers that companies like Spotify and Netflix have, they're hundreds of millions of people. So the ability to reach hundreds of millions of people is really what's going on. And I suppose here in the United States, the big issue is the ability to speak your mind, and whether the government is going to conclude that outlets like Facebook and Twitter are utilities and therefore subject to government regulation as opposed to purely private enterprises. For example, the telephone company is a utility, and therefore it has to carry whatever you want to put on it. So if I want to send an infringing movie over a telephone line to you, the phone company can't stop me because it's a utility and it's regulated that way. But if Twitter and broadband and Facebook and Instagram are conceived as utilities, the regulation platform will be significantly enhanced. I don't think they will be. I think they will always be private property. And that's why the conservatives will hate it when people remove their content.
Well, you kind of put together broadband with social media. I mean, I can see broadband more as a utility as opposed to like Facebook or Twitter or something like that.
Yeah, well, we went through that back in the 90s when AOL bought Time Warner, because the purchase was all about the distribution, the cable network. That's what it was all about. People talked about it as a content play, but AOL was after the distribution because that way its subscribers could get its content faster. So that's really what went on there. And there was a lot of regulatory discussion there. And as we all know, that merger fell apart. But what they were really after was the broadband.
So it's kind of like modern day times, like what Rockefeller did back in the turn of the 20th century, of taking over the railroads and his own trucking lines to move his oil, so that he wouldn't have to pay extra fees, and that's where regulation came in that place, right?
Right, because then they became utilities. Actually, it also happened back when radio came out in the 40s, right? Because radio was brand new and people were controlling it. It ultimately became a utility and therefore regulated because there was a finite amount of radio spectrum available. What you have now is an infinite amount of distribution capacity. So the need to regulate it is a bit different.
So how do podcasts come into play? Since that's what the format that we're doing right now, and it's interesting distribution going on from this as well. I mean, because essentially we're just recordings. We're recording things, and then people find them somehow, across the internet. But would podcasting platforms also come under that regulation?
I don't think so. I think what's interesting is happening in podcasts, for me anyway, as a music lawyer, is that there are people who are posting continuous, an hour's worth of infringing music and putting it up on Spotify, and then you can listen to it as a podcast and no royalties get paid because the podcast platform is free of royalties. So all of the infringing music is recorded. That's an infringement. The uploading it to Spotify is an infringement, and Spotify's distribution of it is a further infringement. And they're getting away with it because it's very difficult to stop that because Spotify hasn't yet figured out that people are doing that.
I think they figured out a little bit. Spotify owns the podcasting platform that we use, which is Anchor. And I've known of a number of different podcasts that have put music up, and Anchor has basically shut them down for putting up copyrighted music. But yeah, I mean, I guess because there's millions of different podcasts, it's very tricky on how to police that properly. I know it's policed pretty well on YouTube. For example, Don Henley has like a team of like 60 people that he has constantly pulling infringing music of his from YouTube all the time and shutting people down. But
yeah, the YouTube solution is a very interesting solution. The law says that if you put up my music illegally, I have a right to make you take it down. What YouTube has said is, yeah, we'll give you that right, but we'll also let you collect money against it if you let us put ads against it. So they've actually added another factor in there, and people are suggesting that that is the right way to handle user-generated content, which contains infringements. And that's really a choice for the copyright owner, right? The copyright owner can decide, no, I don't want you to make any money. I don't want you to use it. I want it to come down. But what YouTube says is if you put your music into our content ID system and you allow us to monetize it, we will monetize it all. You won't get a chance to take the really offensive one down. It's all monetized. So they're changing because they're so big and so powerful. They're able to change the way people look at copyright without regard to what the law says, which is interesting to me. But most of the time I tell my clients to allow them to monetize because they do this to make money, and there's almost no way to stop it from happening. Sure, Don has a team of people doing it. There are companies that hire other companies that do nothing but send out thousands of notices, but there's no way to stop it.
Well, you were one of the architects of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act back in, I guess it was the late 90s, early 2000s, as being attorney for Prodigy. So you were kind of instrumental in creating this issue to a certain extent. In terms of your participation in helping create that legislation. Who do you think has been the most positively impacted by it? And I'm assuming that just user-generated aspects have been most negatively impacted by it.
I don't know who's been, I guess copyright owners have an ability to stop it. The challenge is, if you have posted my content unlawfully and I send a takedown notice, you can send a counter notice. And what happens is that counter notice will cause the host to keep the work up, even if your counter notice is bogus. So if you know you've infringed, but you lie and say you have the right to do it, the work stays up and I'm left filing the lawsuit, which is exactly what we tried to avoid. The whole concept behind the Digital Millennium Copyright Act was to send a notice to make the host take down the infringing work with just a letter, as opposed to bringing in a lawsuit and getting an injunction, because that's tens of thousands of dollars. And the idea was to make it available to everybody. Well, what's happened is that wiseguys have gotten wise and they are posting these counter notices so the work stays up even when it's not supposed to. And I hear from music publishers and record companies all the time about how that's completely unfair, and they're right, it is. So to some degree, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act needs revision. The premise of the act actually took further what was originally in the law, and that the copyright proprietor has to look and make sure no one's infringing his work. It's just that much more difficult. And we knew there would be organizations that were formed that did nothing but look for works. And YouTube's technology for the content ID to hear the song and all that stuff is actually, now can be done by many companies. So you can engage third parties to find your music and send notices and take it down. And they can't do everything, but they get a lot of it. That's the challenge with it today.
Yeah, I mean, the internet landscape has changed so drastically just since 2000. I mean, just in the last 20 years, it's just been...
It's staggering.
I don't think anybody could really predict it. Although I saw an interview a few weeks ago that was run in 1985 where Isaac Asimov was being interviewed by David Letterman. And Asimov actually predicted YouTube. He said there would come a time when everybody would have their own TV channel. So there's some people out there who can see beyond the rest of us and go, this is where I can kind of see these things heading. I don't know, the legal landscape, it's not someplace I think I would get
I was involved
with.
in a movie some years ago called The Last Film Festival with Dennis Hopper and Jo Beth Williams and Chris Kattan. And it was a movie that was purportedly shot on a cell phone. It was 15, 20 years ago. So it was actually pretty, Chris Kattan ran around shooting on a cell phone.
I was about to say that's probably why I never heard of it, because Chris Kattan was involved. But anyway.
Where did you grow up, Mark? What part of the country did you grow up in?
New York, Brooklyn and Long Island.
Have you lived there your whole life?
Yeah.
Did you always want to be a lawyer? Was this like a childhood dream?
Yeah.
Wow. Even though all the jokes about, even though all the the jokes about lawyers being bad all the time, I never got those. There's so many hack comedians making those, what do you call 50 lawyers at the bottom of the ocean a good start,
Well, I think those jokes go back to at least the 1300s. No one's really
probably
been huge fans of lawyers if they've been trying to get away with things.
But even as a kid, I knew that. Now, it's probably bad lawyers out there, because it's almost like having a superpower. Yeah, you can do great bad and you can do great good.
It's interesting. I became a lawyer in 1977. Back in 1977, lawyers were relatively well respected. In 1976 or 75, I think it was, maybe 77, I don't remember, the US Supreme Court said it was okay for lawyers to advertise. And before that, lawyers could not advertise for clients.
I remember that. All of a sudden, those ads popped up on local TV.
And so what happened is the reputation and the respect that lawyers had went right into the toilet. So it became really hard to maintain some level of dignity and professionalism. My father told me, being a lawyer is a respected, learned profession. He was a dentist. So, it was the same kind of thing, but it changed. And it has become insanely competitive and very, very difficult. It's not the same as it was when I'm in 77, 78 when I first started.
I wonder too if the reputation of lawyers are seen as more adversarial, because I think big corporate America has gotten more powerful. So a lot of times you think of the corporate lawyer who's trying to squash the little guy at the behest of his client, his evil corporate overlord. I think that's more of a thing in our modern world. Where there's more shitty corporations, huge corporations that have so much power.
You're reading that's even changing, right? There are corporations that are now trying to make their policies at least environmentally friendly and are announcing they're going to be carbon neutral or carbon positive. or not negative by date certain, all that stuff. But it's one of the reasons why I did not go into criminal law. I did not go into trial or litigation. I did not become a negligence lawyer. I did stuff that people have fun doing. So in a way, if you look at Thoreau, I'm like completely useless to the virtues of society. But I like.
How can that be? You have a halo around your head right now.
That's funny. Yeah, that's a mirror. See.
I thought that was planned deliberately. It's like, we're going to make a really good impact on these guys.
The patron saint of lawyers.
Funny. Yeah, patron Jewish saint of lawyers. So yeah, so I mean that's what lawyers' reputation has gone down. They have become. There's a whole group of continuing legal education courses about how to be more civil to each other as lawyers. It's insane. I never thought that would happen. I try to be civil to everybody, but it's hard.
I think it comes down to that whole, bad apples type of thing. And with any profession, that you just have people who are jackasses and criminals. And, as you have a greater population, the higher percentage of people are jerks and assholes. And it spans the spectrum of occupation.
Well, I think it is but lawyers do have this amazing power. Like I flip burgers for a living, Mark. And if I'm good or bad, nobody's going to be like, oh, he really influenced the world because of his evil burger flipping. Or good burger flipping. Nobody cares. But lawyers can really do stuff. I mean, like the whole what was her name? Erin Brockovich character. I don't know how true that movie was.
Well, she wasn't a lawyer though. She was like a paralegal.
I know, but using the law.
Yeah, but you could do that as a burger flipper, Greg. You could go to Congress. You could talk to. True. I'm not actually joking. You could actually walk into Congress, and if you had something that you wanted to change, people don't know exactly how powerful they can be if they just walk into Congress and try to talk to somebody.
Like Mr. Petix Goes to Washington.
Sure.
I'll be on the Diaz crying like, just listen.
Well, I mean, if you guys are going to get into this, I mean, look at we had a president for 4 years who didn't know the first thing about government and wasn't a lawyer. And before that, we had a president who was a lawyer. And now we have a president who was trained as a lawyer. And you have people who work in government. Things change when you understand how it works, which is not to say that only lawyers know how it works. But if you do have an understanding of how it works, it's very different. I'm a copyright lawyer. I belong to the Copyright Society of the USA. Some of the smartest people and most knowledgeable people that I know about copyright are not lawyers because they studied it and they understand it and they figure out how it works. It's more about study than this. Last night, Bill Maher did a thing about how he's sick of all these celebrities and actors and actresses saying they're going to be governors and presidents because they have no skills at doing that. They have skills at being actors. They should be actors. They shouldn't be governors and presidents. So it's really about your background, your knowledge, your skill, and how you can exploit that. Yes, lawyers have particular skill with regard to how laws work and how the courts work and all that stuff. And that informs every transaction that I do. And that's all it is. It's just a series of tools and skills that I have. That's all.
How stealthy are you with those skills? I mean, are you like one of those assassin type lawyers who can come in and like just ruin somebody's case, or are you more upfront and how you address your opponents?
Like a ninja?
It's a ninja attorney, exactly.
Okay, so I represent a record company and I drafted a form contract. And now one of my clients is going to sign that contract. So I'm sort of in the middle of a conflict of interest. But I know exactly where my contract as drafted for the record company is vague in favor of the record company. So I called it out. And the consultant who's in between was laughing at us because he said, but you wrote it. I said, I know, but I wrote it for the record company, not for the law, for the other company. So yes, I can do that. And yes, there are times when you're intentionally vague in a contract and there are times when you're wildly specific, but and you do it depending on which side you're on. So I don't know, am I ninja? Am I stealthy? I don't know. I think I'm careful. Let's put it that way.
Right, and lawyers are known to be careful, which is why terms of service agreements are approximately 500 pages long, and we're all expected to read it all and agree to it. And I know there was, I think, an interview I saw of yours where you were telling people that if you're going to complain about social media, don't be on social media. If you think they're going to take your, and I'm of a similar point of view. I feel the same way. People are complaining about freedom of speech being infringed and blah, blah, blah. I mean, I lost an account on Facebook because I suggested that Trump was leading us into a civil war. Somebody didn't appreciate that. I got banned and lost my account. So it's like, and that was I think in May of 2020, before
he did lead us into
before
a
any of that stuff happened. Because he's
like
he,
Isaac Asimov. You predicted him. It was much faster for you.
right, exactly.
Not as
Yeah, well,
prescient.
I always saw that Trump was trying to compare himself to Lincoln. I'm like, the only way I see him comparing himself to Lincoln is how he is agitating one aspect of our society to go against another aspect of our society. And I'm like, it's been a benefit to me. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I've been an independent since like 1984. And so I'm willing to vote either side, depending upon who I feel more comfortable with in terms of different.
I don't think Lincoln was agitating for division. He wanted the South to agree, and they didn't because they loved slavery so much. I don't think.
Right. I didn't say that
that.
Lincoln was agitating. I was saying that Trump was, because
I thought you just said that.
he wants to cause a civil war.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
That's what he wanted, so that he could
Lincoln
be,
was handed
so he could be Lincoln and stop that civil war that he created.
He
That
wouldn't
was
He wouldn't
my
have stopped
point.
it though.
He would not know how to do that.
Yeah.
He
Well,
wouldn't.
he would have just told his guys to stand down and stand back.
He wouldn't. They wouldn't have listened. They would have taken that differently. He doesn't know how to do that. He's not a natural leader. But I don't want to talk about Trump because he's out.
Yeah.
Right. He's gone. I agree with you totally. So, but there was some issue that I wanted to discuss having to do with right. Greg has been bugging me because he's like, all right, so we have this guy on. Is he responsible for ruining like karaoke? So, in other words,
In what way?
well, because lots of karaoke manufacturers are copyright infringers. Because one of the main things is the synchronization licenses, where they're not paying. They may pay the copyright owner for the music, but they're not necessarily paying for the synchronization of the lyrics to the music. And so nearly every United States karaoke manufacturer has gone out of business or has been sued by, I think like Sony has gone after them, not just in the United States, but Canada as well. And I think there's like maybe two manufacturers left in the United States that are keeping their noses clean and I think and abiding by those regulations. But it's tricky for karaoke because when a song is popular, that's when people want to sing it, and it's hard to get those permissions up front because you don't know how much money you're going to make selling those karaoke tracks, because most karaoke hosts are notorious music pirates as well. So the manufacturers aren't making their money back.
You can't be trying to blame me because these hosts are pirates. I'm using your words. It ain't my fault, buddy.
So, Matt, are you saying they didn't pay for the lyrics? They just paid for the music rights?
Well, they might not have even paid for those. I'm just saying that's an extra step in the permission process to be able to sell those as karaoke tracks.
So if karaoke is such a popular thing in America, why doesn't one company just say, hey, we're going to do this above board? I bet they'll still make a profit by paying the rights. Radio stations do. They pay BMI ASCAP things. And why can't they do that?
Unfortunately, it's much more complicated than that.
Yeah, see, Greg, it's more complicated.
See, I don't know nothing. Fake lawyer here. Fake lawyer.
A radio station only has to pay BMI, ASCAP, GMR, or CSAC for the right to perform music. It doesn't pay the record company. It doesn't pay anybody else. That's all it pays. Now, the U.S. is one of, I think, a half a dozen countries in the world that does not have what's colloquially called a broadcast mechanical, where the record owner also gets a royalty when a record is played on the radio. Every other country in the world, except maybe China, Iran, and the US, don't have that right. So the radio stations lobby regularly because there is a radio station in every congressional district, and that radio station contributes to the congressman's re-election campaign to make sure that they don't ever have to pay for the right to use the records. That's one side. What you're talking about on karaoke is, as Matt said in the beginning, there is a fair number of rights that are implicated in a karaoke song, karaoke recording, which gets displayed. So you need rights to the print. There are four main rights in music publishing. There's mechanical, there's performance, there's print, and there's synchronization. Mechanical is the right to use music in a, that is the right to hear music with the aid of a mechanical device, a piano roll, a record, a computer, a digital download. Performance is the right to hear the music, the public performance of the music. Print is obvious, it's the print. And sync is the right to use the music in timed relation to a visual image. So karaoke implicates all of them, because you need to make a copy of the song so you can hear it in order to sing it, whether it includes the lyrics or not. You still need the mechanical right. You need the right to perform the music. You may not buy that as the karaoke manufacturer. The venue will buy that right to perform it, but it has to be done. Print is implicated because you're actually going to display the lyrics, and that's part of the Exclusive Rights and Copyright Act, includes the right to display and to copy the words. And synchronization happens because the music is used in time relation to an image, whether it's rolling hills or someone driving a car, whatever it is, all of those rights are implicated. So, and then you add in the fact that, for example, Shakira's big hit, Hips Don't Lie, has 10 publishers who are part of it. So all 10 of them must give you all 3 rights. So in effect, you need 30 licenses for one song.
Wow.
And
So
so
you can
everyone
make a
out there
profit.
should know that he represented Shakira's publishing company too, right?
Right, I cleared that song. I represented Shakira. She was,
Okay.
that song was going to be used in the FIFA World Cup. Many years ago, and we were told it was going to happen in 3 weeks. And I had 3 weeks to clear the song. And of the 10 publishers, they each made claims saying, I own this much, I own that much. And the total number of claims was 135%. So
Wow.
we had to figure out a way to get it down to 100, which we did eventually. But there
Did
are
you-
10 publishers. I've cleared other songs where there are 20 publishers on it. That's just how it goes.
Did you find out if Shakira's hips actually do lie?
I never actually met the woman. So
Oh. Well, Greg, you had mentioned before about his involvement with Holland Dozier Holland, which was the big songwriters for Motown. Didn't you? You had a question about that, right?
Well, no, I was just impressed. I just love their
Oh.
work, and I was like, wow, that's a huge. Because I mean, their Motown songs, they wrote like 90% of them, it seems. And the royalties that must be coming in from all their catalog must be staggering.
some people told me it was the second most valuable catalog in the world after the Beatles. And I didn't believe it because there's always the Stones, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, but what the deal we did was Holland Dozier and Holland each borrowed money from somebody. It was like the first Pullman loan. It was like a Bowie bond after Bowie did his, and they borrowed a bunch of money and they got themselves into trouble by not paying taxes. So we had to get them out, and it was a very, very complicated thing to get them out. We borrowed a lot of money. Those catalogs were worth a fortune. They're worth even more now because the value of catalogs has just gone through the roof, because the tax law is about to change, where when you sell your catalog, you're going to pay a higher rate of tax, and the interest rates are ridiculously low. Plus, there's a ton of money sitting around waiting to get invested. So there are fewer and fewer quality catalogs. So the demand for the quality catalogs is going up.
No, it's true, because there's less people actually making real music these days. They're making like more electronic and sampled music. I would imagine that sampling probably gets hit very hard in the entertainment business, because there's a lot of royalties that have to be paid, and people.
Yeah, well, I have a client who just released a song a couple of weeks ago. She sampled something from the Wu-Tang Clan, and they took 60% of the song, and she had 2 other writers with her. So between them, the three writers who wrote an original track each got 13% of the song, and the Wu-Tang took 60. So I say to my clients, don't sample, just write original music, and write music that other people are going to want to record, because that's why Gershwin makes millions of dollars a year. That's why Bob Dylan's catalog is worth hundreds of millions, and Paul Simon's is worth hundreds of millions, and Neil Young's is worth hundreds, because people can record these songs and sing them also. But if you're just going to do a straight hip hop song, it's not going to be valuable after it's done.
Do you think any of the hip hop acts are sampling Gershwin?
No.
They should. That would be great.
So yeah, I read that you represent the estates of George and Ira Gershwin, and I'm curious about that. Is like, how does an estate seek you out? I mean, how do you get that kind of business?
Well,
Whereas somebody's been dead for like 100 years.
Well, I mean, the copyrights live for 100 years, right?
Yeah.
So George died in 37. And what happened was, where I got involved in with my partner at the time was some work by the Gershwin family and their publishers to convince all of the performing rights societies in the Commonwealth territories, the UK Commonwealth, that the music should be treated as a joint work with the lyrics, because without having done that, George's music would have gone public domain, free to be used on any commercial for tampons or whatever they wanted, with no royalties going back to the Gershwins, but the lyrics would be protected. So we went around and we convinced all the societies which had that rule, lyrics separate from music, that they should be treated as joint, as they are in the US, and that preserved their stream of revenue for as long as Ira lived. And with regard to Porgy and Bess, using DuBose Haywood's life as a measuring life, it was a big project. It took about
so like Santa Flush could have used Rhapsody in Blue because it made your toilet tank water blue. That would have been a perfect commercial.
But only in the UK or Canada or South Africa, not here.
I was just wondering why you picked tampons as your example for Gershwin.
Because it's offensive to George and Ira.
Yeah, their ghosts would haunt.
It was the example we used to the societies.
Oh, okay. So it was one that had been used before. It wasn't one you just picked today.
No.
It's like, for some reason, this is in Mark's head today. Tampons as the example.
Adult diapers using using Rhapsody in Blue.
Now, you also represent Elvis Presley's estate. Is that correct?
I did this with another guy who asked me to come join him and work with him. They were mainly his clients, but what we did for George and for Elvis was we terminated his then single worldwide publisher, and then granted publishing rights in each territory of the world, a separate deal for Germany, Italy, UK, France, Japan, Australia, and all of that. And in so doing, we increased the revenue then from the year we terminated to the next year by fourfold, 400% more money. So part of that was because we got a lot of advances, but what it also did is it made each publisher in each territory committed to the catalog. So it was their money at risk. They had to go out and earn that money back, as opposed to the big multinational saying, okay, we have this catalog, please work it for us, Mr. German administrator, Mr. French administrator. So it was different because it was their money at risk. So the effect was to have a significantly more enhanced catalog.
I've heard that in England, they've lowered it. So in England, I know that Elvis's first album, I think, is in the public domain already, like the early rock and roll.
That's because with regard to recordings, they went public domain 50 years after their release, and that's still the law, but I'm talking publishing, which is a little different.
Yeah.
Which major foreign country, like most highly populated, do you think is the biggest offender or for people holding copyrights doesn't have strong enough copyright laws, in your opinion?
I can't believe you just said that. I was reading an article yesterday that the new U.S. trade representative talked about removing Canada and Switzerland from the list because both of those do not have proper protection for copyright. How's that?
Canada, I was not expecting those two. Canada, because I thought Canada was pretty strict, because I know that they had gotten nailed in a major lawsuit for karaoke purposes about 10 years ago. So I was just surprised to hear that they're lax.
Switzerland has been removed from the list because they changed their laws, but Canada remains on the list because they haven't. So, but
I always thought they were part of the United States, practically, Canada. They followed our rules pretty much.
Yeah, a lot of people think that.
Yeah, that's what we discussed in one of our earlier episodes. We called it America North.
Right.
Canadians tend to not appreciate that.
America's crawl space.
I don't know why. Well, I think this is a really good time to get into our actual client for today. And our client for today is Cancel Me Too. And essentially what that comes down to is discussing what is commonly called cancel culture today. And I'm wondering if that goes into the copyright areas as well. For example, you have somebody say like R. Kelly, who is a major R&B singer and had recently major allegations pushed up against him, which essentially caused him to become a target of what's quote unquote called the
He
cancel
was
culture.
convicted though.
How does that affect how he gets royalties in the long run?
Doesn't
Doesn't at
I
all.
mean, if no one buys his music, then he won't. But his rights and his revenue streams will be the same. The amount will fluctuate based on demand.
So he could be in prison and be the richest guy in America still.
So long as he's still
Serving
entitled.
life.
As if he didn't forfeit his copyrights when he went to jail, then sure, that's what it is. He's got it.
Is there a way you'd forfeit your copyrights by going to jail? How does that work?
Not to my knowledge.
Oh, only be
Or you
like
could sell them.
voluntarily would be the only
Yeah, he
way.
might have sold them to pay his lawyer, right? Because lawyers, are so sneaky and everything. They need money.
I've heard
Isn't
that
it
about
what-
lawyers,
I've heard
except
that
for
too.
you because you've got a halo.
Right.
But
Well, I need money too.
Isn't that what happened to the Beatles in like the 80s? Michael Jackson owned their catalog for a while, or part of their catalog, because they ran out of money or didn't own the rights or something.
Well,
Is that
the
true?
story, I'm not 100% sure of the story, but this is how I understand it. Paul McCartney became friendly with Michael Jackson. Paul explained to Michael Jackson how important music publishing is. And Michael turned around and bought the ATV catalog, which is where
Oh, wow.
where their songs live. Then Michael turned around and sold 50% of that to Sony. So for many years, Sony was known as Sony ATV. When Michael died, the other 50% was purchased by Sony. You no longer hear of it as Sony ATV. It is now Sony. Now, that investment by Michael Jackson paid off to an extraordinary extent. I think he paid 10, 20, 30 million dollars for their catalog when he bought it. And the 50% he sold to Sony was worth 700 million.
it's a good profit.
That pays for a lot of hush money.
But to your point about cancel culture, I mean, that deal happened after he passed.
Right.
So the value, the fact that the asset still lives, it's like a building. You could build a building and be the biggest creep in the world, but the building has value, even if you're the biggest creep in the world. So you buy the building and you move the other guy out. That's part of, copyright lawyers are stuck with the notion that copyright only lives for a limited period of time. Whereas if I spend $10 million to build a building, it will stay forever until it falls down. My copyright will expire at some point. So there's a difference.
Do you think it's a positive thing what everyone calls the Disney law? Because basically Disney pushed the extending the copyright. I think that was 10, 20 years ago. Would you think it's great if like nothing goes into the public domain even after 200 years?
No. I think the public domain is important. I think it should happen. But the challenge, it wasn't just Disney. We did it for the Gershwins as well, because they wanted their copyrights to remain. But the point is that the US law at that time was out of sync with the rest of the world. The US law at the time was life plus 50, and the rest of the world was generally life plus 70. So that's why it was added.
So they added the extra 20 years because I had heard it was 70. When did it change to 70?
Late 90s, I think.
Okay, so it wasn't that too late in the chain for my recollection. Okay. So Greg, basically what that means is just Swonk Boy will live on for you. You'll keep getting copyrights for your publication 70 years after you die.
I'll keep getting zero royalties even after I'm dead.
From your
Well, you will get zero royalties after you're dead, but your heirs may get a lot of money because
No, there's zero there.
the value will go up after you die. Just look at
Oh yeah.
Michael Jackson. Look at everybody else. All their copyrights get more value. Elvis, they all get more value.
I'm expecting my sock collection will get very valuable after I die.
Are they
People would
clean?
Yeah, they're clean. They're all, like white socks. So I think that but they'll come in handy for people.
Some
especially-
fetishist might like them if they were dirty. Some sicko.
No, I don't think I have any fetishists who are
Some
following
lawyer
me
will
around.
probably like it.
Are
Some
lawyers
sick
known for
lawyer.
being the ones with the most fetishes? Is that
I
the,
don't know. Not really.
So earlier we were talking about Facebook and the thing that's been going on the past year. Is there any, could you imagine one of these like guys saying, you took me off Facebook, like taking it to court? Like, do you think any judge would even accept that and say, oh, this is a trial case? Maybe
I'm
this
not
could
sure I
change
understand your question.
how people are getting taken down on Facebook, even though it's not a utility, but it has become something that's almost more vital than the telephone company in most people's lives. Do you think, could you picture that going to trial, or a judge would say, no, you don't have a leg to stand on?
Yeah, I'm sure there will be lawyers who will take it to trial. Listen, when I was at Prodigy, we had invented the chat room. Okay, so you'd go into a room and there'd be 20 people and they'd all be talking. So at one point, Prodigy was sued because a visitor to a chat room went out and slept with someone else in the chat room, and the visitor got AIDS. And so they sued Prodigy because the guy got AIDS.
That's fascinating.
Silly. That's ridiculous.
That's what I said, and the case was dismissed immediately. But the most interesting part about that case was that the lawyers issued a press release about having filed the case. And on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, the top 2/3 of the page were the name and address of the lawyer, and about 2 lines were about the actual case. So
that's the guy who should have been canceled.
Right.
That lawyer needed to be canceled.
Right. So, but the notion of someone bringing an absurd lawsuit happens all the time.
So it was done mainly for marketing purposes, is why they brought that case.
Of course.
It's like they were just trying to get more business. So it's like advanced ambulance chasing.
So one of the major cases that we got resolved at Prodigy was a case called Stratton Oakmont versus Prodigy. The guys who ran Stratton Oakmont were featured in a movie called The Wolf of Wall Street. And Stratton Oakmont there was a discussion board on Prodigy where someone said Daniel Porush, who was then an officer of the company, is a crook. And Porush sued Prodigy saying, we were responsible for not taking that down, and therefore we were liable to him for defamation. And he sued us for $200 million. We got the case dismissed by saying, we're sorry, and we took the post down.
Yeah.
So think about that for a minute.
Just saying you're sorry.
Right.
So,
you can anyone can sue anybody for anything, anytime, anywhere in the United States. It's not like the rest of the world. You don't pay for the loser's lawyer's fees. In the UK, you pay. If you sue and you lose, you pay the other side's lawyer's fees. So there's an incentive not to bring the lawsuit. So there's nothing wrong. Everybody sues for crazy things. I don't, but that's the problem with lawyers. They do. On the other hand, they will tell you they're bringing the lawsuit because they're trying to expand the law or push the boundaries, which is entirely legit. But when you get crazy stuff like that Prodigy AIDS case, it's not good for the profession. Just like our friend Rudy Giuliani, who I think is a disgrace to the legal profession. I think everything he's done for Trump is disgusting, and he should be disbarred. But that's just my opinion.
Well, if he's working for Trump is almost like its own disbarment.
Well, for certain things, but I mean, the cases he filed and the positions he took were none of which were based on fact, are antithetical to what the ethics rules require of lawyers. So I think he should be disbarred. I'm not the only one. The New York State Bar Association has written that. There's people in Florida who have, but it was, he's bad news.
He should be disbarred from humanity in my book. He's barely a human being at this point.
I don't want to kill the guy. I don't want him to be a lawyer.
Apparently, Greg is busy canceling Rudy Giuliani right now.
His life.
But what about Andrew Giuliani running for governor of New York, though? That's a fascinating thing coming down the pike. I was watching something about him where he was once on a reality show for up-and-coming golfers. And even the people on the reality show didn't like Andrew Giuliani. They said that he really likes to hear himself talk.
Yeah.
So
he's quite a guy. My wife remembers when Rudy was inaugurated as the mayor, and little Andrew, maybe 3, 4, 5, was on the podium, however old he was. He was busy picking his nose the whole time. So.
It's like home training for later work. So getting back to the advent of the cancel culture. Now, personally, I see cancel culture kind of having been created back in the 80s with the advent of like the Parents Resource Music Center, back when they were trying to take out artists at the time like Ozzy Osbourne or Twisted Sister for violating the morals of our youth and trying to shut them down, and trying to shut down Dungeons and Dragons back in the day. So it was more of like a Republican thing back then to cancel people out. And things have kind of flipped in here into the future, where now, I think largely because really the Me Too movement, where those legitimate, egregious offenses are happening where people kind of deserve to have that castigation. But at the same time, people are also being canceled for even just being supporters of Trump.
Or just being funny.
Just being a supporter. Like, people are canceling friends out. People are losing friendships, like on Facebook and other social media, strictly because they supported Trump. And which I find is like a really interesting thing. I mean, I don't necessarily buy that, Trump supporters are intelligent, but I don't know that necessarily they should lose their friendships because of that. I just don't know
There
how
is the
that'll.
argument that Trump is like, it's not like it's like, I didn't like Ronald Reagan when I was a teenager. I didn't want to vote for him, but when I was 21, but it wasn't like Donald Trump is such a really hateful person that if your friend likes him, you got to question, like, what kind of person is this that would want this man to run our country, a racist, horrible person? It's like, I have friends who I love who are Trump fans, and it makes me shake my head and be like, there must be something dark in their soul that they could say, yeah, I want this guy to run our fate or destiny.
I don't know about that. I think you really have to look at it differently. I think that people who support Trump align with his notion of victimhood, and that they too are victims, and he's out there to fight for them as victims of the elite liberal society. Okay, and that's where it comes from. I happen to agree with you. There are people that I was friendly with and then revealed incredible support for Trump, posted horrible things about what happened to Ahmaud Arbery, the jogger who was shot, posted horrible things about George Floyd as if he deserved to be lynched and because he was a drug dealer or something like that. And it made me question my view of them. I didn't mind that they were Republicans. Right. I didn't mind that they were they supported smaller government and lower taxes. That was all fine, and that's a healthy debate. But when they say things like Floyd deserved it because he passed a counterfeit bill and he was a drug dealer, it made me nuts. And so I really have distanced myself from those people. Are they still friends? Maybe. I don't know. But I don't talk politics to them at all.
Right. And I think that's kind of where I've gone with a lot of people, is I just back away from discussing politics. I think I kind of test them out a little bit in terms of what kind of a human being they are. Like, where does their heart lie? Do they truly care about their fellow human beings? Because essentially the whole George Floyd thing, regardless of whatever he did, was a modern day lynching, just to use the term that you said. It wasn't done with a rope, but it was done with a knee. And that's the same thing that happened. And I think that dealing with these issues is, we can say one positive thing about Trump is that he lifted the rock of America and exposed the worms that were there.
That we thought maybe
unintentionally lifted the rock.
Yeah.
He didn't realize he was lifting his own rock by being part of this process. And
it also wouldn't have happened at an earlier time. I mean, the internet amplifies everything. Even the smallest bit. So, I mean, that's a big part of what happens. But ultimately, I don't know. I used to think it was my daughter had a bat mitzvah and she had 70 of her closest friends there. I think she's down to like 6 now. Not that from politics, but there's only so many people you can really be close with, right? And really have deep relationships with and talk to. So my circle's gotten smaller and friendlier and closer, but I don't know how it's happened to others, but that's how it's happened for me. I just don't talk to the people that just are on that edge of the world.
I think the pandemic has been pretty helpful in terms of lessening one's growth for friendships as well, where, I mean, it exposed a whole different level within American society and global society in terms of, where you felt regarding the validity of the virus and the validity of vaccinations. And you go, why are some people acting this way? It becomes, are they intelligent or not? And is that what we're dealing with? Are we dealing with, finally, we're getting to the Peter principle. Everyone is heading it to their own level of incompetence, and they're talking beyond themselves. And that may be what's happening like on social media too, is like we're finding out who the real, incompetents are.
The politicization of the mask issue was a disaster. It was just terrible.
It's ridiculous.
I, for one, forgive the CDC for making mistakes a little over a year ago about the virus because nobody knew.
Yeah, it was a novel
Of
virus.
course.
It's like, come on, people, give them a
So-
break.
So they didn't know. So they said, don't wear a mask. Okay, now you have to wear a mask. It's okay. Whatever it is, they did. But, fortunately, touch wood, I didn't get the vaccine. I didn't catch the disease, and I got vaccinated, so I escaped it. My whole family did too. So I'm very grateful for that. And I just think that people that don't get vaccines, fine, don't get vaccinated. I don't care. You'll get the disease and you'll have it a horrible time. It's up to you.
In defense of the CDC, I remember a lot of the reason was that there just weren't enough masks, so they wanted only healthcare workers to have them. They didn't want every Tom, Dick, and Harry to buy the masks, and then there would be none for the nurses and doctors in the emergency rooms.
Exactly. And
That was part of it.
Makes sense to me. It's fine. Yeah, it was part of it. But still, I mean, if they don't want to get vaccinated, don't get vaccinated. Get sick. Then you'll be sorry.
Yeah.
That's like it's just idiots.
Well, no, they
feedback
actually
from
hold that
them.
up as a badge of honor. I know like hardcore pro-Trump supporters who got COVID and they survived, and they're like, see, it wasn't so bad. It wasn't such a bad thing. So that's why
They're
it's
just
okay.
lucky. That's
Right,
right.
exactly. But they're not going to look at it as luck. They're looking at it as, even 6 months later, they still can't smell or taste anything. They're like, well, it's just a symptom, but I didn't die.
It's still a hoax.
They just get stuck on the whole death statistic too. It's like, really, that's not the issue here. The reason we shut things down wasn't specifically because of deaths from the virus. It's deaths because of people who got the virus being in the hospital and preventing people who are in car accidents or having other life-threatening issues not being able to have a bed because idiots got the freaking virus and keep the people who need it from getting it. Anyway, so sorry. CDC stands for cancel damn culture. You know that, Greg?
No, I did not. But I do want to get back to the whole thing of the internet where I find myself getting into arguments about cancel culture almost every day because most of my friends I'm very liberal.
Are they trying to cancel you?
I'm basically like a pinko socialist commie. And I find that even my liberal friends, every day I'm trying to argue with them about like, oh, can I sing this song at karaoke or is this okay? And so here's an example. I own a copy since the 80s of the Turner Diaries, which American Nazis, they actually just call the book. It's like their Bible. It's basically a sci-fi book.
You own the Turner Diaries?
I do. Even the 80s,
aye.
It was hard to get. It was almost Samizdat. It wasn't canceled, but it was really hard to find. And I think it's very valuable to know your enemy. I don't want anything canceled. I'm like with the ACLU. Like, remember when we were kids, the ACLU fought for the Nazis to march in Skokie, Illinois. Remember that on the news? It was a big thing. Because they're like, guys, it is a slippery slope. Everyone should be able to say whatever the fuck they want. And I know there's a lot of bad stuff to be said, but then who's going to say what's bad, what's good? Like, you got taken out from Facebook. I know that wasn't the government, but just because you were making a joke actually against Trump, but they took it. So I always get in arguments, as you can imagine, because I'm pretty much an extremist about freedom of speech. But
well, I got that TikTok video taken down for hate speech too.
You did?
Yeah, which was weird because it was just a synopsis. It was just a synopsis of one of our episodes, but they took it down for hate speech. I appealed it, and they said it was still hate speech. I'm like, who am I hating? We're talking about QAnon. I'm like, who didn't like that one? I don't know.
They did some QAnon, and they said, "Oh, it's probably going to be hateful."
The episode was called JFQ Flat Earth and You, so maybe it's like the flat earthers came after us, or I don't know.
Yeah.
So.
But I find literally every day I'm arguing with a friend, discussing, having a debate. And I'm usually on the other side where they're just like, no, but that's just wrong. And I'm like,
well, I'm going to suggest something. Well, I'm going to say, I don't have as much gray hair as you do because I gave up those fights.
I know. I still find it fascinating because it is, like Matt said, when I was a kid, the censors always seemed to be on the right. And the fact that my side wants to do it, it's kind of freaking me out. It's like, wait, we're the ones who love freedom of speech. I mean, that seems the core of liberalism is freedom of speech. There's a lot of stripes to liberalism, gay rights, civil rights. But that to me was the core. Like, don't censor me. We have the right to say things.
I have a very clear recollection of the bookcase in the spare bedroom in my house growing up with a prominent copy of Mein Kampf on the shelf. My parents actually, and I was actually born in Germany, and my father at the time was in the service, and he lived in one of Hitler's old houses. Wow. But he had a copy of Mein Kampf, and he read it, and he understood it, and he said, never again. So, I mean, I get your point. That's how it goes.
Yeah, you should read that stuff, especially Jewish people should read Mein Kampf. So when people say, oh, no, Hitler wasn't like that, it's like, no, I read his own words. He said he wanted to exterminate the Jews.
Right, exactly.
He clearly said it.
Exactly correct.
So would Hitler have been canceled now, Greg?
I'd like to think so.
You know, you hear those debates about people will say they getting Mark.
They say Trump is the same, that he's Hitler reincarnated, right?
I think
the way his populist movement and the way he's achieving success is by appealing to the victims, just like Hitler did. I mean, it's very similar.
Yeah, I think the difference is that he's not really pointing out a particular group of people other than perhaps Democrats for censure and for attack. You know, I mean, he's always said like the Democrats out to get him and what have you. But yeah, I think that's the difference between him. Is Hitler just came out and just said, you know, take out the Jews.
But Trump uses the coded language. You know, he says urban. This city, which is very urban, is a shithole. The shithole country of Africa.
Coded is different. That? I mean, you could call him Hitler light, maybe.
Yes, Hitler censored.
Or Pol Pot Junior, possibly.
You guys don't live in New York, right?
No. Greg is from New York, though.
I mean, we hated Trump forever.
I know. I remember that.
I hated Trump before he was ever elected he was even running for anything. I'm like, I hated this guy for 30 years.
Mark, I read a statistic that you guys, New York City, voted in 2016 like 90% for Hillary because you guys knew what a shit he was before the rest of the country.
That's 100% correct. The county, New York County, which is Manhattan, went 9-1 against Trump
because they knew.
Right now, it went 7-3 in 2020, but it was 9-1 in 2016. I mean, come on, the guy, we knew what he was.
Yeah,
that's surprising.
I mean, anytime I saw him on TV, starting with like the Trump of the Deal, the Art of the Deal, way back when, I was like, this guy's like serious douchebaggery. And I was just never, and everything I saw him do basically in the public from that point on, I'm like, it just showed me what this guy's character was. And I wasn't from New York or anything, but it's just following him over the years in the media.
I'm an entertainment lawyer, right? So as my wife says, I represent wannabes and has-beens. So
we were thinking about changing our show to that as well.
So more than one of my clients had been approached by Trump to appear on The Apprentice, and I begged them not to do it, and they listened. So because it was I just didn't see it as any upside for him. All that was going to happen, you're fired. It's like, who cares?
They could have become the Secretary of the Interior 2 years ago if they were on The Office.
That would be worse if you knew who the client was.
Yeah, that would be worse. You're right.
Were you representing like one of the Real Housewives of New York or something?
No. A talented musician, but no.
Well, I have come to the end of our hour. This has been a highly enlightening conversation with Marc Jacobsen. We really, really appreciate you coming on. We're having actually an anniversary show in June 23rd. It's a Wednesday. It's going to be 2 hours live. If you want to pop your head in for like a minute or two and say hi, we'll give you some kind of weird fake award if you want to come.
Do I have to wear a tux?
You don't have to. You can come naked if you want to. Greg would appreciate that probably.
No, I would.
But give you a chance to meet our co-host who makes websites for attorneys too. We were sad that he couldn't make it on today. The funny thing is that we've never had an attorney on our show, and next week we're having another attorney on, so it'll be somebody else to go. You guys don't know what you're talking about. That guy do? I believe she is like an advocate in New Jersey. I don't have the details. I have to get her bio. So I just know that she was like the first African-American woman in her position. I think it's like a judgeship in one of the townships in New Jersey or something. Sounds good. Yeah, her name is Edwina Martin, if I remember correctly. But anyway, I greatly appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. Oh, one quick mention of the two movies you got out, which is The Virtuoso with Anthony Hopkins, and with Snowbabies was the name of it, I believe. And you produced those. Okay, great. And hopefully, if you have anything else of interest later on, if you want to jabber about it with us, we'd love to have you on again. Is there anything else you'd like to mention about your practice or anything else? You want to say what your website is, or?
Go Knicks, www.marcjacobsen.com, MARC.
Yes, that's Mark with a C, everybody. Not C-A-R-C, but M-A-R-C. Just to...
What do you call Marc Jacobson at the bottom of the ocean? A tragedy. You're one of the good ones, Mark.
You called him Jacobson?
Yeah, right.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jacobson?
Yeah, Jacobson.
I'm sorry.
Jacobson? What world do you live in that you can't pronounce Jacobson?
And you just said it, too. You just said it.
He did. I thought you were making another joke.
Oh, no. This whole life is of ours.
I was trying to make a joke, but it was actually a tribute to you.
All right, well, thank you again. And this has been another edition of the Law Offices of Quibble, Squabble, and Bicker. See you guys next week.
You've left the offices of Quibble, Squabble, and Bicker. It's over. It's over. It's time for you to go home. It's over. It's over. Go away now.